Please welcome T. Boone Pickens, Chair of BP Capital Management, and Rebecca Jarvis of ABC News.
You changed around the scenery, and now everything is new to me. But it looks just right, yeah, it looks just right.
Hello, and welcome, Mr. Pickens, a man who needs no introduction, the Oracle of Oil, probably the best person for Oklahoma State University in the history of all time.
That's right. $500 million.
500, and the stadium goes by the name of?
Boone Pickens.
That's right.
All the seats on the back of them have Boone Pickens on them when they turn them up. That's not.
We want to start things off today with a quick poll question, and you're going to see the results behind me, and you can answer these on the devices that you have. And then I'm going to ask Boone what his thought on this question is, because it's a multiple choice. So the question is, which sector do you think will be the biggest driver in leading large-scale changes in the U.S. energy market? And you've got three options: A, public, B, private, or C, nonprofit. What do you think, Boone? Public, private, nonprofit?
Well, it's private. What is a nonprofit? Trying to think, where's nonprofit anything in this country? I mean, you know, we're based on making profit. I was in Washington, it's been 2 or 3 years ago, and the questioning to me, and I was before some committee, I think it was on taxation, and they said something about making money and all, and I finally got a chance to respond. I said, hey, have you ever seen a business that was founded on a basis of breaking even? And the congressman said, I don't know. I said, well, have you ever seen one that was founded on a basis of losing money? The only thing that we're interested in the capitalistic system, which I love it, listen, is it all is about making money. Is that bad? Of course not. You make money, you pay taxes, and you hire people, and the economy goes forward. It's such a simple, wonderful structure that we have in this country. It is. Anyway, public is on private. I said on that deal.
Private.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, we'll see what you all have to say about that. I also want to remind everyone that we are taking questions. You can tweet us and hashtag it Energy Chat. I will be reading those questions throughout this interview with Boone, and so feel free. That's why I have my phone here. I'll be checking it from time to time, and it's not because I'm sending out personal tweets. And I want to start off with Boone with getting the lay of the land, because anybody who has been following the energy markets these days may find it a little surprising. Because every day we're seeing another troubling headline coming out of the Middle East. The U.S. is bombing ISIS, and yet over the course of the summer, oil prices, they've tanked 20%. And now we have 30 states in this country that are supposed to be paying below $3 a gallon for gas this year. How does that happen? Why does that happen?
Well, the reason the price of oil has gone down is because the United States has added to the production and reserve base of the world. They're the only ones that have added. I mean, we put over 2 million barrels a day in. We're producing. Let's get the numbers first. But there's 92 million barrels of oil is produced in the world every day, and 70% of that goes to transportation fuel. But 92 million barrels a day, we use 18 million. So we're using 20% of the 92. Second to us is China, and they're using 10. So they're about half of us. But we still import about 8 or 9 million barrels a day. So we're producing almost 9 million barrels. Well, we peaked on production in 1970 and went down to 4.5 million barrels. Declining to that and kind of bottomed there, and then we came into horizontal drilling and multiple fracks in the horizontal hole, and consequently we're back up to almost 9 million barrels a day. We produce more energy than any place else in the world. Saudi Arabia, Russia, wherever you want to go. But natural gas, we are number 1 and number 3 on oil, and we're moving up. The Saudis produce about 9.2 million barrels a day. So we're almost to the level of the Saudis, and the Russians are about 9.5 million. So it's an unbelievable change in this country, all for the good of our country.
Have we beat peak oil?
Have we what?
Have we beat peak oil?
Have we?
Are we past that conversation? A few
Well,
years ago, it was $147 a barrel. Everybody was afraid it would continue to go higher. Yes, we're producing more of it, but you just laid it out. There's still a lot of other countries that are contributing to our energy.
Okay, I was a peak oil advocate. I thought we peaked in 1995, and what happened is we developed horizontal drilling, and things changed, and we have not peaked. But the United States, it's an incredible, to me, incredible statistic, is in the history of all wells, our wells drilled, because not all of them are oil wells, but wells drilled, there have been over 5 million wells drilled in the world today, and over half of them have been in the United States. You say, well, shouldn't we have depleted all our oil if we drilled more wells than any place else in the world? No, we have developed technology that has absolutely changed the world. For instance, Permian Basin has produced about 40 billion barrels of oil, and now they're saying with horizontal drilling and the multiple fracks that you've got another 75 or 80 billion in the Permian Basin, which to me, I'm a geologist, so I can, it's incredible, because when I got out of school in '51, you could say that all the oil that had been found in the world at that point, over 90% of it had been found by geologists and geophysicists from the United States. You can say the same thing now. I mean, we are it's an incredible industry in this country.
When oil prices are soaring, it's easy to make the argument that there needs to be alternative sources of fuel. But when oil prices are dropping, when consumers aren't feeling the same type of pinch at the pump that they have previously, how much more difficult is it, in your estimation, to sell the idea of natural gas, other alternative forms of energy? And is it a potential hardship for Washington to get beyond if oil prices are falling as they are? And how would you get beyond that?
Well, you say oil prices falling. Look at natural gas. Compare oil to natural gas, and on a BTU equivalency, parity of heating value, that it's 6 to 1. So oil at $100 a barrel, same value for natural gas would be 16. And so you have natural gas at 4. And think, my gosh, what a steal. It is. I mean, it's very cheap. And the reason it's cheap, for instance, natural gas here, $4, Europe, 12, Asia, 15. We're the cheapest energy in the world in this country. Natural gas by, 1/4 of the rest of the world, say. And oil, we're 10, 15% cheaper, and gasoline, we're half the price. How can that happen to us? It did. It has happened to us, and we have the cheapest energy in the world. So it's great for our economy. It's interesting, though, that there's not much said about it, and that's what you're asking me. Why is it something? Because everything's going so smooth, nobody complains about the gasoline price, diesel price, natural gas price. Nobody complains. And Washington reacts to what's on TV. It's not news that it's cheap. It's news when it's high, and everybody's complaining.
You have complained about Washington, the lack of leadership in Washington, many times over the years.
You've noticed it too. You have too.
Many times over the years.
Yeah.
And I wonder, when you look at the landscape in Washington right now, where do you see the leadership on this issue? And where do you see things moving, if there are any positive places that you see them moving in?
Well, there's no reason, again, Rebecca, that why does Washington has an extremely difficult time functioning anyway. So why would they get on some subject that there's no interest in? And energy right now, there's no interest in energy. Energy is huge to the security of this country. And we do not need any other country or anybody else's oil around the world. Yes, we are importing about 8 or 9 million barrels, but the half of what we're importing comes from Canada and Mexico, secure sources of oil to the United States. The other half does come from OPEC, 4 million barrels a day, down. It's been as low as 3.2 million recently, but 3 to 4 million a day comes from OPEC. We don't need that. I mean, if something happened to OPEC oil, forget it. We can take care of it. We can cover that base. We're sitting here with 700 million barrels in storage, which is in the SPR. And I'll bet, all at once, you all said, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I'll bet you have forgotten about it because nothing's ever mentioned about SPR. 700 million barrels, where'd that come from? In 70, we peaked at 10 million barrels a day. In 73, we had the Arab embargo. And in 74, we passed the law to store 700 million barrels of oil in salt caverns in Mississippi and Louisiana. Well, that happened. The oil is there. The most we've ever drawn out of it, we've drawn oil out 5 times. The most we've ever taken at one time was Katrina, the hurricane, and we took out 18 million barrels.
So what would you do with that? All the oil sitting there in the SPR?
Yeah, what do you do with that? We have no energy plan in this country.
What would be,
but
with that,
truly, we do not have a plan.
If
we're
we're
the only
specifically talking SPR, though, because this is, the conversation started with ISIS. The conversation started with the Middle East, and you brought up the fact that there's a lot of production going on right here at home, clearly a much larger portion of the pie than there was even 5-10 years ago. But what, on that very small issue, the SPR, what would you do on that issue?
Well, the SPR should be worked back in to the global supply for oil.
So get rid of it over time.
Yeah, you absolutely crater the market if you crowded it in. So you start looking at, let's say that we take 4 million barrels out of SPR, get it back in the market. That would probably take 10 years to ease into the market and not disrupt the market. Okay, but go back to the OPEC question. I'm convinced on buying oil from the Mideast, which is about 2 million barrels a day. There's 17 million barrels comes through the Straits of Hormuz, and we get about 2 million, a little less than 2 million barrels a day from there. I believe, and Jim Woolsey, who was, you remember, was CIA director back in the H.W. Bush administration, that Jim and I have had lots of conversation about this. We're convinced that some part of that oil that comes from the Mideast, that the funds, some of the funds that for that oil get into the hands of Al-Qaeda. Not because the sellers of that oil to us, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait, that it isn't because they're trying to hurt us. They are paying ransom to keep those guys off their back. And I think when you're buying that oil from over there, you're paying for both sides of the war. And that was my harp 10 years ago. Hey, I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to pay for both sides of a war. And we don't have to do that. It is not necessary to do that. But the problem is, let's go back 4 minutes ago, is we have no energy plan.
What do you think the biggest barrier to getting that energy plan is?
Biggest barrier?
To getting that energy plan. You've been talking about this. You've been talking about,
You're
we talk
getting
about
tired
the lack
of me,
of
aren't you?
leadership. No, but you talk for many years about the lack of leadership, but you've also talked about security and tying that idea to our energy plan. So when we know what we know today about our national security, about the funds going from OPEC sometimes into the hands of the wrong individuals, when we know that information, what is holding us back from making an energy policy and living up to it?
Well,
We've only got
I hate
14
to be
minutes left.
I hate to be repetitious, but there's only one answer to it, is we just don't have the leadership in Washington. I mean, no, we don't have an energy plan because we have no leadership. Today, if you wanted to get an export permit to export oil, you'd go to the Commerce Department. If you want to get an export permit for natural gas, you would go to the Energy Department. And if you wanted to get the Keystone Pipeline into the United States, you'd go to the State Department. Now, if you would never have that in your organization, if you had an organization to deal with all three of those items, you would have some individual or some department that would process all that. Only in America do we have, but, get serious.
Well, what is stopping somebody like you from saying, you know what, we've got the natural gas, we're getting the natural gas, I'm going to build natural gas stations all over the country so that there is that infrastructure there. And people will see how cheap it is, and they'll eventually, General Motors, Ford, everyone will have to make natural gas cars because they'll see the reality of the situation. What's stopping you or someone in your position with the funds to do it from doing that?
Rebecca, don't start off anything to an 86-year-old guy is eventually. Bad choice.
Forgive me.
Eventually you will get, hey, listen. The stations are already there.
There are some, but they're not as prevalent. I mean, I could go buy gas anywhere and I would know exactly where to find a gas station, but a natural gas station?
I'm not talking about your car.
I don't have a car.
My daughter, smart. If you don't have a car, you're smart. My daughter called me and said, we're getting ready to get a new car, and could you help me that we're thinking about a natural gas car? And I said, Lizzie, I'm really not interested in your car. And as a apology, she said, surely there's a nicer way to respond to me than you're not in. I said, I'm sorry, but I'm after the trucks. I'm after those that use 20, 30,000 gallons a year. And those stations are in. Mm-hmm. We've got them across I-40, I-10. 70% of all the heavy-duty trucks operate in a regional pattern. Only 30% of them are crossing east-west, west-east. And so, but those stations are all in, called a natural gas highway. And so then the next group you're looking at fleets, people that use a lot, and they fuel in a central station, such as in Southern California, leadership. A guy named Barry Wallerstein runs South Coast Air Quality Management District, AQMD. He had an air quality issue, and he said, who are my biggest polluters? They said, trash trucks. They idle a lot, inefficient burn, and so he said, okay, what's the incremental cost between diesel and natural gas for the trash trucks? That's only two fuels you have a choice of. And said $50,000. Well, that has narrowed now to $10,000. But at that point, he said, okay, when you buy a new trash truck, you have to buy natural gas. I've got to get the air quality fixed in Southern California. So that happened, and it happened like that. I mean, because those trash haulers said, my gosh, I'm going to get a $50,000 grant to switch over to a cheaper fuel. They did. They switched over, and now over 70% of the trash trucks in California are on natural gas. Waste Management, the biggest trash hauler in the United States, said last year Now, everything that Waste Management buys, 90% of it will be natural gas in the United States. Well, you say, how did all that happen? Leadership. Wallerstein, AQMD, is the guy that started the ball rolling. The same thing is going on now for heavy-duty trucks. They are switching over. Your biggest customer that leads the crowd when they make the switch on trucks is FedEx. FedEx is the biggest, but Ryder has 165,000 trucks, and Penske has 150,000 trucks. But the one that you want to see switch is BNSF, the railroad. When they go, then all the truckers have to go too because they compete against each other. Well, BNSF is running tests now in 4 or 5 different places on natural gas. It's already happened in Canada. The first one there, it was the Canadian National Railroad, and they are switching all their stuff over. But you've got a lot more questions than this, and so.
That's great. So the way that natural gas is collected is through fracking. And you and many others believe this is the viable solution to obtaining the natural gas. There are groups also out there who say this is environmentally damaging. How do you address that issue? And are there other things that can be done within the scope of fracking as we know it today that would make it potentially a more environmentally sound activity?
Well, you know, and really you would be surprised how many times I've gotten in front of an audience and on this subject, and nobody ever gets up and says, hey, Boone, you don't know what you're talking about because this fracking stuff is causing us a lot of problems. We've got environmental issues that you're not addressing. Kind of say that. My response at that point is, tell me about them. Okay, here's one response, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I said, okay, tell me about fracking, what it's done. Get specific, don't give me vague generalities. Guy said, okay, you had a flowback out of a Chesapeake well up here, had a line break, and they ran the flowback from the well out on the ground, and it goes over, gets in a creek, kills all the fish. I said, okay, how much fluid do you think came back? That he said, well, I don't know, it's probably maybe 100,000 barrels. I said, well, it takes 100,000 barrels, you frack with 100,000 barrels. So on the flowback, I would be surprised if you had more than 2,000 barrels that got spilled, but killed all the fish. What was it that killed the fish? He said, well, it was the salt water that came back. He said, I know what it was. I said, okay, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm up here in the winter. You're the people who put all the salt on the roads.
But you also realize...
Wait a minute, it's got a conclusion to it.
Okay.
And the guy said, yeah, but that's a different kind of salt. No, but I asked people, that's the only place that a guy engaged me and gave me some example of that happening.
But you know that the conversation is coming up and that there's public opinion involved and that there's legislation as a result and rules and restrictions as a result of that public opinion.
Be careful.
What do you mean by that?
What are the rules and restrictions?
Well, there are states now that are trying to keep fracking from happening.
Sure, there are states that have moratorium. California and New York.
So what do you do in that context when public opinion in some of these states is skewing in one direction?
Well, if they don't want to frack in California and New York, don't do it. And I said in New York on an interview, I said that New York is, they think they're big in everything.
Friendly crowd?
Not so big in natural gas. Okay, they've got some good natural gas production right up in northwestern New York across from Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is enjoying the success and the activity of having natural gas production. They're not complaining over in Pennsylvania. And the governor, New York, Cuomo, he says we're not going to frack any wells in New York. Fine. Don't do it. I don't care. And
what do you think about Elon Musk? Elon Musk, Tesla, a lot of people know Elon Musk from Tesla, What do you think about him in recent weeks getting tax breaks here in New York?
Getting what?
He's getting tax breaks here in New York and in Nevada for his renewable energy projects. What do you think about that? A state that will not
I
allow
don't care.
fracking. You're good with that?
Well, if that's what they want to spend their money on, it's fine.
Is it a waste?
Is it what?
Do you think it's a waste?
You're talking about the electric car, the battery? Tesla? Is that what you're saying?
Well, he's pursuing renewable energy projects, and both New York and Nevada are helping to subsidize that through tax breaks. And I wonder if you think that those tax breaks are money well spent.
No, but if they want to spend it that way, it's fine with me. Hey, listen, I'm for anything American. I take the battery, I'll take wind, solar, I don't care, just so it's American. I want to get off the OPEC oil, that's where I'm coming from, and we have the resources to accomplish that pretty quick. But, you know, if you said you've got to either short Tesla, it's Tesla, I got it right, haven't I? Yeah, Tesla, or go long, I'd go short because it's too expensive. But I may be wrong. I'm glad I didn't short it at 50 because I saw it the other day, it was 200. So, but you know, listen, I am completely open on any energy issue. And you know, but to sit and listen to somebody talk about how fracking causes earthquakes. Get out of here. I'm a geologist. No, fracking doesn't cause earthquakes. I mean, you're talking about fracking 2 miles down, and it's not even realistic to think that could be the case. And also, there have been over 1 million wells fracked in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, New Mexico, and there's no record of their damaging freshwater aquifers. That isn't the case. People get up and say it ruins the aquifers. What are you talking about? You don't even understand. They don't even understand. Right quick, okay, that I have spent a lot of my time, and I live in Texas, and I have a ranch in Roberts County, Texas, which is up in the Texas Panhandle. The largest aquifer in North America extends from Midland, Texas to the South Dakota border across 8 states. That's the Ogallala. Goes right across my ranch. They're fracking a well on my ranch today. I say that and people go, well, what are you doing about it? What am I doing about it? Nothing. They're not going to hurt anything. Well, I'm just going to we make very good oil wells on my ranch. There are 2 rigs running on the ranch today. That doesn't bother me. I have an aquifer that's 500 feet thick on my ranch. It's up, we encountered at about 200 feet, and it's all the way down to 700 feet. Okay, they're fracking down at 10,000 feet, 2 miles below the aquifer. There's no way the frack there can get in that aquifer. So I fracked, my company, and some of you may remember, was Mesa Petroleum, and I left there in '96 and merged it with Parker Parsley, which is now Pioneer Natural Resources. And but when I was with Mesa, we fracked over 2,000 wells, and it's as routine as me brushing my teeth in the morning.
I want to make sure we get to some of these Twitter questions.
Okay, good.
This one is from Willie Payette. Keystone Pipeline. Will it be built?
Sure.
When?
Well, I don't know about this guy we got in Washington because he's put it off 6 years. That was put on his desk about the time I started the Pickens Plan, which was in July of '08. So it's 6 years, the decision there. And he may not call a shot on it, but it will be built, yes, all for the right reasons.
This one comes from PDJ Plano, who says, how are we progressing with off-grid power generation technology such as fuel cell, solar, or similar approaches for individuals?
Those are all expensive. I mean, if you want them, you can get them. But I mean, system in the United States, you are going to look at the cheapest thing first. But in this case, natural gas is cheaper, cleaner, and domestic. So solar is more expensive, and it will work. Kind of a cumbersome piece of equipment on a solar deal, but I run solar panels on water wells on my ranch. Just run a little panel out there, and it'll pump water right out of the ground for me. And so, but all those things, fuel cell, sure, it'll work. It's more expensive than anything else. We have a pump in that General Motors pays for. It is a hydrogen pump in a station at LAX, Los Angeles. And they have a hydrogen pump in there, and they give the hydrogen away for anybody who has a car that needs hydrogen fuel. And it's used about 1 or 2 times a month because nobody uses the fuel.
Mm-hmm. We got to wrap it up, but I want to ask you one last question. A decade from now, how does the U.S. energy picture look?
I didn't hear it.
A decade from today, what does the U.S. energy picture look like?
The U.S. energy picture?
Do we have an energy policy? Do we have an energy policy?
No, you know we don't have an energy plan.
In 10 years, still no energy.
Will we have one?
Yes.
Well, you're back to leadership. I mean, every country in the world has an energy plan but the United States.
What's our mix going to look like? What do you think is the most likely mix of energy 10 years from now?
Okay, you've got a supply of natural gas for over 100 years. So it will become a transportation, they'll have a greater part of the transportation fuel market, natural gas will. What will it be in 10 years? It isn't going to be over 50%, but it will have the heavy duty trucks is what will happen. And that's a lot. If you want to take out OPEC completely, 3.2 million barrels of oil a day, which was what it was in July, you can take it out with the heavy duty trucks. I mean, completely. That will happen.
That will happen.
That will happen. You will have plenty of natural gas, and we will have, we'll have plenty of oil in 10 years. We have a lot of oil to be recovered in the United States. Now, if this president is bent on green, fine with me, but if you do that, you're going to have to subsidize it. And for instance, the biggest user of wind energy is Germany, and they don't even have any good wind. So it's expensive for them. They did it. Now they're getting ready to dump some of their elected officials out because their electric bills are too high, which is exactly what will happen. But we have the best wind. One more time, the United States is blessed. We have the best wind from Sweetwater, Texas to the Canadian border. I mean, we can put all the power from wind that you would ever want in that corridor right there. It's more expensive, but it is happening. So in 10 years, we will like the global energy picture for the United States. We will be the cheapest of all with more energy than anybody else has, and we will have the best trained people in the United States to get the most out of the resources we have in this country.
Well, we're going to end it there on a high note. Boone Pickens, thank you.
Thank you.